Summer 1943 began with the sound of cicadas. They screamed from the trees outside, so loud they drowned the wind, so loud they almost masked the groan of the trucks that pulled into the yard. The house, a squat building of wood and tin, had no name. The soldiers called it by a number. The women called it nothing at all. Hannah had been there 3 months by then. She counted days by scratches on the wall under her sleeping mat, thin white lines that were sometimes smudged by dampness when the rains came. She never scratched more than one at a time. It was bad luck, she thought, to imagine a future she hadn't survived yet. The house was quiet most of the day, except for footsteps, boots in the hallway, boots on the porch, boots on the gravel outside. Boots that stopped sometimes in front of the door, long enough to make everyone hold their breath. In the afternoons, heat pooled in the airless rooms until the walls sweated and the wooden beams groaned. There was no breeze. The shutters stayed closed even when the sun painted the sky red. Minako, the youngest of them, used to hum to herself until the guards shouted at her. Now she mouthed songs silently, lips moving without sound, a bird singing in a dream. There were 10 women in the house, each from a different town or village, each carrying a different shadow. They spoke in whispers, or not at all. Words felt dangerous here. Meals came twice a day, carried in by a soldier who never looked them in the eye. Rice in a tin bowl, watery soup if they were lucky. Sometimes Hannah wondered if the silence was the point, if the house itself was designed to swallow voices until the women forgot they had them. Outside, the war was everywhere and nowhere. They heard planes sometimes, droning far above. Once, they heard distant explosions that made the shutters rattle and the soldiers curse under their breath. But the world beyond the fence felt like a dream, unreachable, untouchable. One night, when the moon was full, Hannah woke to the sound of someone crying. It was the kind of crying that tried to be quiet and failed, breaking apart into ragged gasps. She found Minako curled in the corner, her face buried in her hands. "They said the Americans are coming," Minako whispered when she saw Hannah. Her eyes were wide and wet, reflecting the moonlight. Hannah didn't know if it was true. Rumors slipped through the fence like wind, sometimes carrying hope, sometimes fear. Americans meant the war was moving closer. Closer could mean freedom. Closer could mean fire. She sat beside Minako, her back against the wall, and reached for her hand. It was small and hot and shaking. They stayed that way until the cicadas started again, announcing dawn as though nothing had happened. The days blurred. Sweat dripped from the rafters, insects hummed in the corners, the house held its breath. The guards smoked on the porch and laughed about things the women could not hear. Once, Hannah caught sight of a calendar pinned to the guardroom wall. She stared at it so long the soldier shoved her back inside, but she'd already memorized the date. Summer 1943. The year the world was on fire. Sometimes, Hannah thought she could smell the war, oil, metal, and something sour like burned cloth, drifting in from far-off battlefields. The soldiers grew jumpy, their boots moving faster in the yard, their voices sharper. Something was coming. And the house stayed silent, waiting. The first fire came at night. It began as a faint orange glow at the edge of the sky, just past the hills, faint enough that Hannah thought it was sunset lingering too long. Then the smell came, smoke, sharp and acrid, drifting over the compound walls. The guards ran that night. Boots pounded across the yard, orders barked in clipped voices, a truck engine roared to life. The women huddled in the dark, listening to the chaos outside. Someone prayed under her breath. Someone else whispered, "It's the Americans." But dawn came, and the gate stayed locked. The smoke didn't stop. Each day it grew thicker, until the air tasted of ash. Sometimes the horizon glowed like the mouth of a furnace. The guards smoked more cigarettes now, their laughter gone, their eyes restless. One night, Hannah overheard 2 of them arguing outside the window. She only caught pieces of it, words like withdrawal and reinforcements, but she could hear the fear under their voices. Then the planes came. The first time, the sound was so deep it rattled the floorboards. Hannah and Minako ducked under their sleeping mats as the whole house seemed to shake. Far away, they heard explosions, one after another, a rolling thunder that went on for minutes. When it was over, there was silence, then cheers. From somewhere beyond the fence, faint but real. Someone out there was celebrating. Someone out there was still alive. The women began to change in small ways. They started talking again, at first in whispers, then in quiet conversation. Minako even laughed once, a small, startled sound that made everyone turn to look. It was as though the fire beyond the hills had burned a crack through their fear, letting something else seep in, something that tasted like hope. One afternoon, Hannah stood on her toes to look through a knot in the wooden fence. She saw black smoke curling into the sky and, just beyond it, a column of men on the road. They were not Japanese. They wore green uniforms, carried rifles slung over their shoulders, and moved like they owned the earth they were walking on. She dropped back down before a guard could catch her, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would wake the whole house. That night, the compound felt different. The guards were restless, drinking and shouting late into the dark. One of them slammed a door so hard the frame splintered. Another fired his pistol into the air. The women stayed very still, waiting for it to be over. When dawn came, the horizon was red, not from fire, but from the rising sun. And beyond that sun, faint but growing louder by the minute, came the sound of engines. By noon, the sky trembled with the weight of bombers passing overhead. Dust rained from the rafters. The air split with the distant crash of artillery. The ground itself seemed to shift, as though the world had been waiting too long and was finally cracking open. Minako grabbed Hannah's arm, her nails biting into her skin. "They're coming," she said. Her voice shook, but there was something fierce in it too. Outside, the guards shouted to each other, their voices rising in panic. Trucks started. Doors slammed. Somewhere a crate crashed to the ground, spilling its contents. And then, just before dusk, the sound that changed everything, the clatter of the front gate as it slammed shut for the last time. The guards were gone. The compound lay silent again, but this time it was not the suffocating silence of fear. It was the silence that comes just before a storm breaks, charged and waiting. Hannah stood at the window, staring at the empty yard, and for the first time in years, she let herself imagine what it might look like with the gate open. Morning came so still it felt wrong. No boots on gravel, no shouted roll call, no rattle of keys. The house seemed to breathe with the women inside it, every board and nail listening with them. Hannah sat up slowly, her hair damp against her neck, and waited for the sound that never came. When nothing happened for an hour, she rose and pressed her ear to the door. Silence. Only the cicadas outside and, far away, the faint thud of artillery. She slid the door open a crack. No guard stood watch. One by one, the women stepped outside, blinking in the sharp light. The yard looked the same, dusty, fenced, the gate still chained, but it felt different, as though someone had lifted the sky a little higher overnight. Then the ground trembled. Not like before, when shells had fallen far away, but closer, sharper. Dust shook from the roof beams. Trucks rumbled somewhere beyond the fence, then roared off in a cloud of dirt. They caught a last glimpse of soldiers hanging off the tailgates, rifles clattering, faces set hard as stone. And then they were gone. No one spoke. No one moved. Hannah could hear Minako's breathing beside her, quick and shallow. They stood there until the sound of the engines faded into the hills, leaving only wind. Hours later, the new sound came. Engines again. Lower, rougher, a different rhythm. The women gathered by the fence, clinging to the wood. The first olive-green jeep appeared around the bend, sunlight flashing on its hood. Another followed, then a third, tires grinding in the dirt. Men climbed down, taller than the soldiers they'd known, with sunburned faces and rifles slung across their chests. One raised his hands, palms out. His voice was loud but steady. "It's over," he called. "You're safe." For a heartbeat no one believed him. Then Minako cried out, a raw sound like a wound opening. Hannah felt her legs give way and dropped to her knees in the dirt. The soldiers moved quickly, sweeping the yard, opening doors, looking into every building. One found a tin bowl lying on its side and set it upright again for no reason at all. Another knelt to offer Hannah a canteen. She drank greedily, the cold water spilling down her chin, tasting of iron and life. The women began to gather in the yard, some crying, some laughing without sound. A soldier tossed a candy bar toward them. It landed in the dust and sat there, untouched, until Minako picked it up and held it like a relic. And then it happened. A loud crack, a splinter of wood, and the gate, swollen with years of rain, gave way. It hit the dirt with a crash that echoed off the walls. No one moved for a long second. Hana was the first to step forward. She walked slowly, as though approaching a sacred thing, then placed one foot on the fallen gate and crossed it. Beyond lay nothing but the road, empty and winding toward the hills, but it might as well have been another world. One by one, the others followed. Minako crossed last, clutching the candy bar, her shoulders shaking. The air on the other side felt different, wider, cleaner, warm on their faces. Somewhere far away, the guns still thundered. The war was not done. But for them, on this patch of earth, it was already over. The road out was dusty, lined with grass gone wild and fences leaning like tired old men. The women rode in the back of an open truck, wrapped in blankets the soldiers had handed them. Their hair whipped in the wind, their faces pale but alert, as if each bump in the road might wake them from a dream. Hana sat with her back against the wooden rail, knees pulled up, watching the land roll past. Every field felt impossibly green, every tree too alive. For so long she had seen the world through cracks in a shutter, now it all seemed too large to take in. Minako still hadn't eaten the candy bar. She turned it over in her hands, the silver wrapper catching the light, as though saving it meant saving the moment when everything had changed. By nightfall, they reached the field hospital. It was nothing but canvas tents glowing like lanterns in the dark, smoke from cook fires curling upward. The air smelled of iodine and wet earth. Wounded men lay on stretchers outside, some groaning, some silent, their faces lit by flickering lamps. The women were led to a tent set apart from the others. A nurse with dark circles under her eyes handed them cups of water and wool blankets. No one spoke at first, as if waiting for someone to tell them it had all been a mistake. Then one woman broke. Her sob started small and then spread, until the whole tent seemed to tremble with the sound of women crying. Some wept silently, others aloud, hands over their faces, letting go of months, years, of locked-in grief. Hana didn't cry. Not yet. She sat cross-legged, staring at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. The nurse knelt in front of her and said softly, "You're safe now." The words felt too big to hold, too delicate to trust, but they sank into her chest like seeds. Sleep came fitful that night, broken by distant explosions and the shouts of medics. But no boots kicked in the door. No one called them by number. When morning came, the air was cool and pale, and Hana stepped outside alone. Mist hugged the ground, and a river cut through the earth just beyond the camp. Its surface shone silver in the dawn. She walked to the edge, barefoot, her toes sinking into the mud. The water was shockingly cold when she cupped it in her hands. She splashed her face, gasping at the sting, then did it again. And then, without meaning to, she laughed, a soft, startled laugh that seemed to echo off the trees. Minako joined her, holding the candy bar. She knelt, tore the wrapper, and took a bite. The chocolate was cracked and dusty, but her eyes filled with tears. "It's sweet," she whispered, as though the taste itself was proof that the world had changed. One by one, the others came to the riverbank. Some washed their faces. Some let their hair down, combing it with their fingers. One woman unclasped a broken ribbon from her wrist and let it float away on the current, watching it vanish downstream. The soldiers stood back, hats in hand, as if witnessing something holy. Hana stood, her wet hair plastered to her cheeks, and turned toward the sunrise. The sky burned orange, and for a moment it looked as though the hills themselves were on fire again. But this was not the fire of bombs or burning villages, this was a fire that warmed rather than consumed. Somewhere behind her, the accordion player began to play. The sound wavered at first, then steadied, filling the morning air. The women didn't speak. They just stood and listened, breathing in the dawn, watching the river run clear, carrying away twigs, petals, and whatever shadows they had released into it. The war was still raging beyond the horizon, but here, by this water, something had ended. And something else had begun.